we're live.
Good morning, everyone. It's Wednesday, which means we have ADPT Physio founder and CEO Phil White with us. And we're talking about a very, very popular topic among our videos, which is the key steps to overcoming forearm tendinopathy, which is something that I think is very near and dear to my heart right now because I'm dealing with a little bit myself. For the very first time, I have lateral epicondylitis. It's usually always medial for me, but we'll get to what that means in a
Great
sec.
new take on an old classic, eh?
That's right, exactly. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to discriminate on any part of my arm, you know. Anyway, before we get started, if we haven't met, my name's Yanni Burmeister, and below me is Richard Lellies. We are head coaches of Unity Gym and the Unified Movement System, where we turn driven people into strong, flexible, fit athletes. And we are joined, of course, by our good friend and partner to the Unified Movement System, Phil White from ADPT Physio. Phil has, among other things, had a big influence on our program over the years. We've worked together for many, many years now, and Phil is an expert in all areas of rehab, soft tissue, and exercise. Phil has a degree in sports exercise science and also a doctor of physiotherapy. And he's just an all-round cool guy. And one of the things that we always emphasize when recommending Phil is that he has a lot of skin in the game. And by that, I mean he's an athlete himself. He participates in triathlons. He's represented the country in ultimate frisbee. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It's an awesome game. And he just does a lot of really, really high intensity activity, including sports like beach volleyball and geez, I don't know, you name it. What else do? You do a lot.
Most recent was a marathon, so that was a big one. The half
Yep.
Ironman before that. So, and yeah, I've also done like pretty solid powerlifting over the years. So I've really since finishing my 11 years of ultimate frisbee, tried to just experience all the different types of stress the body can go under in different sports. So
He also does a lot of ocean swimming. You've ridden a bike across Ireland, you know, like
Scotland. Yep.
Scotland.
Yeah.
And the reason why that's important, and this is where I was getting at, is that when you choose to build a team of experts around you to support your training goals, it's absolutely critical that you work with people who have experience in the fields that you're interested in, because two physical therapists or physiotherapists of the same education can have very different experience levels and specialize in different areas. And I've always found that I get a much better result when I choose people who have experience in the things that I do. And so, yeah, that's a really important thing to consider. We always like to throw a link up in the comments so you can connect with Phil, because he does online physiotherapy, which is really, really great. He also has a clinic in North Sydney here in Australia if you are local. Now, let's get started.
To jump in on where the experience of particular sports and injuries become really relevant. I've always found that I've tried to turn my background of being someone who's had lots of injuries, and as painful and as frustrating that it has been over the years, as being a positive, because I've had plenty of experience with most injuries. But elbow pain, so golfer's elbow, tennis elbow, the tendinopathies, was something that I hadn't actually experienced despite all my kind of powerlifting and
I like this story.
time doing the calisthenics. So I decided to do a little experiment to see just how quickly I could bring on some elbow tendinopathy, and then also if I could rehab it effectively. And so the reason I kind of wanted to do this is I've seen just so much different information out there with golfer's elbow. And if you do have a look at the really popular YouTube video that the Unity guys did on this topic from 5 years ago. Was it 5 years or 7 years?
It was a long time ago, I think.
Yeah, it was like 2015. So yeah, 7 years ago.
Yeah, 7 years. Their kind of understanding has probably changed a bit since then. But my basic idea was I wanted to do the same exercises to give myself medial elbow tendinopathy as then I would to rehab the injury, and really show that it is a matter of getting loading right, not necessarily a silver bullet exercise that's going to fix everything for you. So in saying that, like I do, like looking back over that video now, like there are lots of different tools in the video, which then gives a great way of tackling it from a few different directions. But I hope the overwhelming takeaway is going to be it's just a matter of being really consistent with what you're doing and giving it the load it needs.
It's interesting in reviewing the video. There's so much that I would do differently now. You know, that we called this video. Richie, why don't you read out the details? What was the title of the video again, and how many views has it had, and when was it published?
Golfer's elbow, the 7 steps to overcoming elbow pain. And it's had how many views? Quite over 100,000 views, I think.
236,000.
Yep. And
236,000 views.
Had a lot of comments on it as well.
And it's a lot of really positive comments on it. You know, it's one of those videos that people have often said, this has changed my life. You know, this has fixed. I've tried so many different things, and this has finally fixed my tendinopathy or golfer's elbow or tennis elbow or whatever. The treatment for either of them is very similar, and we'll get to that in a sec. But there's really one key thing that I think, looking at this and now having worked with Phil opened a clinic in Unity Gym after we published this video by a couple of years maybe, and then we started to work with Phil a lot and learn a lot more about this, and he saw that it was such a common injury that people dealt with in the gym that he really went deep on this. He wanted to really master it and figure it out, and he had a lot of influence on our program. We have a rehab program for this specifically now, and you know looking back at the video now, identifying the key element. You know, there's a couple of key things that we do here, but the one really big and important thing now, having worked with Phil, my background is, the very first time I had golfer's elbow, I went to a physiotherapist and I got prescribed the exact wrong thing to do, which was to take a break away from training and let it sort of recover for a couple of weeks and then reintroduce training again. And there was no discussion of how to reintroduce training again. So I did what everyone does. I took 2 weeks or 3 weeks off and then came back and just tried to take up exactly what I was doing before. And then working with Phil the second time around, he had a very different approach, which was to not take a break from training, but just alter the way I was training to suit the load capacity that my arm could sort of tolerate, and to be okay with enduring a little bit of discomfort to still focus on strengthening. And I'll get Phil to explain why that's so important in a sec. But I think that's probably the key reason why people got a good result from this video, which was, you know, we tell people the very first step is to eliminate the cause. And for me, what it was the change I made in my training was I was very, very religious with my 5 days a week of strength training in the gym. And then I took up golf on the weekend. And because I'm very competitive with my mates playing golf, I wasn't very good at it. So I went and started, we'd schedule a golf game every Sunday, and I'd go to the driving range on Saturday to hit, 300 balls just to try to practice my stroke, and then go in and play a full 18 holes on Sunday. Those were 2 very important days for me that I overlooked at the point because I was a big buff gym junkie. I didn't think golf was going to stress my body very much. And they were the days that I was getting most of my recovery. And now I've eliminated recovery or interrupted the recovery of those 2 days by introducing regular golf practice. And that was enough to mismanage load and blow out how much my forearms were dealing with, and so going back to what I was saying before, when I first was told to stop everything, I stopped everything. Literally, there was no exercise, and Phil will explain why that's usually catastrophic for golfers or tennis elbow. And then the second time around, when I got it, it was when I started to really get passionate about handstands and muscle ups, calisthenics. And I when we first sort of discovered calisthenics and introduced it into our training, you do what everyone does. You want to get really good at it really quickly. So I did muscle ups almost every day and handstands almost pretty much every day. And that again was enough to overload my forearms and hands. And the approach that Phil took was so different, and it was really, and I got a much better result. What happened the first time around was that I didn't get rid of my golfer's elbow. I just got used to it and dealt with it, but it got so painful that I could hardly even turn the key in my car. And I used to ride a motorbike. I remember riding my motorbike was so difficult because just holding the handlebars and throttling with the arm that it was my accelerator arm that had the golfer's elbow. It was so painful. Like everything, just getting to and from work, which was a short commute, was really, really painful and really difficult. And then the second time around, I was able to overcome it very, very quickly by continuing to exercise, doing the exact thing I was told not to do. Phil, why don't you share? And then Richie can sort of share his experiences too, because he's dealt with this too.
Yeah, just quickly, Richie, do you want to give a quick insight into your experience?
I had a similar experience to Yanni where I sort of tried to implement too many things on the same muscle group in the same week without enough rest. And for me, it was practicing handstands. And on top of handstands, I would train 5 days a week. And of those 5 days, 3 of them were pretty intense upper body routines where gripping was pretty essential. Mate, you could probably even say 4 of those days were gripping intensive because of deadlifting, really. 3 of them upper body, 1 lower body day with massive element of gripping. And then I tried to incorporate handstands on top of that twice a week. And yeah, I found the same thing. My golfer's elbow basically flared straight back up. I had it previous to that. Was fine for a little while, but it's like after a little while of doing that routine, like I was saying, it just flared right back up. Yep. That's my experience.
And Yanni, just quickly, is the physio who told you to rest the same one that got everyone doing the floppy wrists?
No, I don't think so. This was a physio.
That was a different one. I just wanted to bring up the floppy wrists. I thought that was just a good example of one of those things where people often, with all injuries, have the kind of impression that it's going to be stretching and mobility that fixes all injuries. And I think that floppy wrist is a good example of people like, oh, you just need to add in this funky mobility exercise that you've never seen before, and that will save the day. But just quickly, I wanted to go into a bit of like the history of why there is so much different information out there and why it is kind of confusing, and just giving a bit of an idea of like how the understanding of tendinopathy sort of changed over time. Because I think what happened is basically people treated this as if it was a regular muscle tear. So a tear of the muscle, which as most people know, you just give it a bit of time to recover. And, if it's a really minor tear, that might be sort of 2 to 3 weeks, or if it's a more significant tear, it might be, up to sort of 6 weeks. And the thinking being that like, okay, it's just the same as a muscle tear. We'll just give it a bit of rest and then get back to doing what you used to do. But as kind of the understanding and as more research went into how tendinopathies are actually different from muscle tears, that's where this whole different style of training has actually, or a whole different style of rehabilitation has differentiated itself specifically for tendons. And I do like the history of the first person to really come up with a tendinopathy protocol, back probably when they were calling it tendinitis, but it's called the Alfredson protocol. And so basically this guy who, I can't remember if he was a physio or a doctor, basically he had such bad Achilles tendinopathy that he just could not get rid of it. He kept on resting it and then getting back into his exercise and resting it and getting back into his exercise, strengthening a little bit, but not consistently. And basically it just stuck around. And then he was like, talked to a surgeon about getting it worked on. And basically the surgeon was like, oh, like, unless it was an Achilles rupture, I can't really do anything for you. So what he tried to do was load it as heavily as possible, as often as possible, basically doing like super heavy calf raises, like with ridiculous volume, just insane amounts of reps per day, with the aim to basically try and spontaneously tear his Achilles via overload. And what accidentally happened was he cured himself of this tendinopathy, and developed a whole sort of treatment practice and a whole protocol called the Alfredson protocol, to deal with Achilles tendinopathy. And so, yeah, I just love that story. It's like a often, like penicillin, like a lot of
tried to
the
tear
biggest things are mistakes.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
I love
there's
it.
a whole other modality of treating back pain with another similar mistake where someone accidentally lay face down on the table in back extension, and they developed the guy who accidentally did that, named a protocol after himself. So just like with all medicine and science, so often it does come from these happy mistakes where you're like, oh, there's something here. What, like, this isn't what we usually do. Let's explore why this works. And so basically, like, from that, it started to give people the idea that it's actually all about building up capacity in the tendon, and that if you rest it, that's actually going to not be super helpful. So should I jump into a bit of the pathophysiology, so the why and what tendinopathy is? Yeah,
absolutely.
So basically, just to be really clear with terminology, so tendons are the structure that attaches a muscle to a bone. So people get really confused between ligaments and tendons. Basically, ligaments attach bone to other bones, and tendons attach a muscle to a bone. So a muscle has contractile fibers, so they shorten and lengthen. And what differentiates them going into tendons is tendons basically become like they're a non-contractile structure, but they're made up of a type of tissue that's really quite stretchy and is good at adding a bit of efficiency into the system by having almost like a spring-like effect, which is why your Achilles are a great way of building efficiency in the leg. But basically, we've got these tendons that attach into the bone from after blending into a muscle, and tendinopathy happens when you basically overload to the point where you start to exceed your threshold. If you exceed your threshold a little bit and then give yourself adequate recovery, then you're going to get signal to get stronger and to lay down more tissue and to become more resilient. But if we go above that level of threshold, and you don't have the adequate recovery, then that's where you just Yanni and Rich, as you just said, like when you started adding in this novel stimulus like golf or handstands, you've kind of got your baseline level of stress, and then you've suddenly just exceeded it with this new activity and eating into your sort of recovery time for the tendons. This sets in motion a kind of cascade of the body trying to be helpful by laying down new tissue, as just like with if you graze your knee, your skin sort of puts down new tissue in the form of a scab. It's unorganized skin tissue that's basically just patching up a hole, and then it's working hard underneath to basically lay down fresh new skin. And some skin, sometimes you get after a scab, you get perfect looking skin, and other times you get a scar. This is kind of what happens in tendinopathy, where your body tries to lay down lots of new collagen fibers to reinforce and prepare that tissue for the excessive load that you just put on it. Except if you if you keep doing it too much, then you never give your body a chance to basically recover and allow it to happen well. But then if you stop training and you follow that advice of just rest, then you've got this like new tissue laying down, but then you're not giving it the stimulus to align in a productive way. So what you then get is basically, instead of having these nice inline collagen fibers that act as a really good force transfer spring-like structure, you've now got this disorganized tissue that isn't as good at taking load, and then you become functionally weaker. So that's why getting that training stimulus of still using it, but just bringing your load down a little bit, is going to be giving the signal it needs to lay down great new tissue without becoming weaker and leading to further disrepair.
And is that why when you reintroduce, and you hear this all the time? Yeah, that was really good, and makes a lot of sense. This is what I experience, and you hear this all the time. People take time off and then they go back and they experience the same or more pain the first time they pick up a weight than they were when they were actually training. And that's definitely what happened to me. So is that your brain signaling? Because we talk about pain science all the time, and pain being a symptom of the brain. Is that your brain sending you a really erratic pain signal because you've got this weaker tissue there and you're trying to do something that's about to really hurt it? Or is it related to the fact that there's still an injury there?
Yeah, so it's kind of partly both, because yeah, like as we've talked about plenty of times, pain is pretty complicated, where it's basically information from your periphery that's then modulated by your like your at the spinal cord level, so from your metabolic system, hormones, stress, all of that, and then processed through your brain through like perceived threat and context, so your thoughts, mood, belief around the thing. But with this kind of like, that's kind of becomes really relevant when you're looking at chronic pain, stuff that's been there for months and months and months. At this sort of like early flared up stage of a tendinopathy, I think it's probably more on the pure signal from the disorganized tissue that has like a chemical change, which would signify damage to a structure. And that's probably more of the predominant thing than something you can change your thoughts about and get yourself out of pain. So yeah, I think it's more of that at the initial stage, but once you start to get into that like 3 month plus zone of ongoing, then it like the longer pain sticks around, the more it becomes like important your sort of understanding of pain and that perceived threat. So yeah, I think it is more of that acute stage, but that's one of the real telltale signs with tendinopathy, is it is often one of those things where it actually feels better once you've got going. Like with a muscle tear, if you were to get that pain initially and then you kept working through it, it would get worse and worse and worse. But tendinopathy, it's often like, oh, that's sore, and then once you get going, it actually starts to feel better, and then it's often that next day pain, or when you first start to use it in the day, or if you knock it against something, that's when it's really sore. So that's a good telltale sign of you've got tendinopathy rather than a muscle tear for all you people playing at home.
So quickly, in the last 3 minutes, we need to wrap this up with a reasonable plan of attack that someone who's experiencing this tendinopathy could take to help themselves, at least take the first step. And of course, disclaimer here, this is not medical advice. This is not Phil diagnosing and giving you specific advice. And I would urge you if you want help rehabbing your tendinopathy, to get in touch with Phil and have a proper consult so that he can give you specific advice for your needs. But for everyone playing at home, what would you suggest?
Yeah, and so this goes for all tendinopathies basically, is think about what the muscle that the tendon is attached to does. So in this case, it's sometimes a bit surprising for people to realize that if you're getting that pain on the inside of your elbow, that's actually the muscles that are your wrist movers that are the main ones at play there. So think about what the muscle does, and then think about the context of what you want, what activity you want, and what specific demands does your sport or activity or the loading that you're doing have on that muscle. So is it pure strength and endurance, or like gripping for a long time? Is it maybe things like handstand and handstand push-ups, where you've got a speed element and a stretching element as well? And then basically think about how can you like go up the ladder of loading. So if you're like if you're not able to do much without making it sore, then you start with very simple low range of motion, decently heavy intensity, working to a point where you actually are generally feeling a little bit of pain. But the feedback, which is tricky, is actually it's the next day if you've exceeded your baseline pain. So when you wake up in those first few movements, the regular level is there. And then you basically want to climb that ladder and then make it basically fill in all the gaps to get to the specific needs of your activity. So for me and my like for an Achilles, if for running, then it's going to be going from doing like static heavy calf raises, like a calf raise, then building up to doing full range of motion, looking at both different types of calf muscle, and then adding in like skipping to give it that that spring like loading stimulus, as just like you would have in running. And then it's going to be like working up to heavier plyometrics and then building up running from there. So that's a very specific to getting your tendon used to not only strength, but then also that spring-like loading. Whereas for someone who has a forearm tendinopathy, where if it is something like handstands, that's the challenging situation, then it's going to be building up, starting from that same base level of strength, but then bringing in loaded stretching tolerance gradually over time. So you want to be doing like the heavy slow loading seems to be like Alfred's protocol. Old mate who made the happy mistake. His type of loading is now his protocol is not the most evidence backed now. Heavy slow resistance, so basically like a decently heavy weight, you're constantly moving at a slow pace, so slow eccentrics and concentrics. So you want to build up that tolerance, and then for handstand specific, you'd be building up more tolerance with that full extension under stretch, because stretch loading, compression loading, like strength loading, and spring loading are the all factors that will stress the tendon, and it's a matter of thinking about what your particular activity needs and how do you gradually fill in the gaps so your body is prepared for that activity. And again, the feedback is at 24-hour pain, so it's quite hard because you've then got to constantly be looking back at what you did the day before. And then again, making sure you're not doing something, you're not loading every day. You've got to give stimulus plus recovery, and then you'll get adaptation.
Awesome. Boy, right. We could talk about this for a long time, but unfortunately we're out of time. We have to jump into our coaching group and give them their daily dose of UMS love. Phil, thank you very much. For everyone watching at home, where can they find you to learn more about this? And
yeah, look up ADPT Physio online. So there's my website's actually adp.physio. So that's no .com, no .au, nothing like that, just .physio. And otherwise, yeah, check out on the social medias. And if you would like to work together, or if you'd just like any specific help, yeah, don't hesitate to get in contact.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
If you have a specific questions, I'm every Wednesday on here. So leave a question and tag me in it on the UMS Movement Mastermind group, and we'll get stuck in.
Good stuff. Thank you, Richie. Thank you, Phil. And we'll see you all tomorrow. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.